Alright, so in this next section, we focus on setting up our text box to draw each different character individually. This will not only help us fix that problem where the text box types and then gets halfway through a word and then loops around, but this is also the key to expressiveness and text effects like color, text shaking, any of that stuff. This is definitely going to be the most advanced video of all of these, or I should at least just say the most involved. There's going to be a lot of variables of different types, a lot of looping through stuff, and a lot of kind of intertwined lines of code. So of course I walk you through everything as efficiently as I can while being as detailed as I can, trying my best to explain things clearly, but just know that going into this video, it's going to be very important that you really pay attention to what you're seeing on screen and that you're copying each line exactly how I put it in. There's plenty of opportunities for you to maybe misspell something or to put the wrong variable in a place, so yeah, just be vigilant. And yeah, I guess that's about it. Just get through this video and kind of over this last main hump, and then you're going to be home free after that. So we need to initialize some new variables in the create event, and these are all going to be arrays for helping us add those automatic line breaks. We'll need these arrays for every page, and a lot of our text effects are going to be used on every page, and some will even have their own data for every single character. So something that will help us out now is instead of directly initializing this stuff in this create event, we're going to put it in a script, and then we're going to put it in this create event, so we could also put it somewhere else. Let's go ahead and start setting this up. We can go into our text box functions. We can put this above our script text. Let's call it script set defaults for text. No arguments are needed here. This is just going to be for initializing and keeping track of some variables. So we're going to need a two-dimensional array called line break pause for position. The first value, let's put 0, and then the second one, let's put page number, and let's set it to a pretty high number. This variable is going to store where in our big page of text, what positions should the text move on to the next line instead of keeping drawing this way. And it's a two-dimensional array because we can have any number of line breaks per page. And as you saw with my text box can hold up to 4 lines without it drawing over. So depending on how long the text is, I could have a line break position 0 for the first break, 1 for the second break, 2 for the third break. But depending on how big your text box is and how small your font is, you could just have lines and lines of dialogue. And not only that, but each page will be different. If you only have one word on one page, you're not going to need any breaks. And if you have 100, you're going to need a bunch of breaks. So that's what this variable is. And this next variable assists us finding all of these. So this is going to be line break num. And this is for number. And this is just going to be a one-dimensional array. We can set this to 0. Oh, and by the way, the reason we set this number so high is because we don't want this 0 to be saved as breaking the line 0 characters in and just creating a space there. So just set this to a high number, and then once your text gets long enough, it won't matter. Okay, sorry, anyways. So line break num, this will keep track of the number of line breaks we have while we're looping through the pages, and that's how we're going to keep adding to this number. You'll see how that works in a bit. This next variable is going to be a similar thing, where it helps us continuously keep track of something as we're looping through. So this is going to be called line break offset, and it is also one-dimensional for the same reason. These two are not values that we need the information for every page once we start typing. These are only there to help us get the actual important variables like this one, which tells us where the actual line breaks are. And what this one is keeping track of is the width in pixels that we need to reset each individual's character's X position. What I mean by that is whenever the text is typing and it gets too long and we find where there needs to be a line break, we need to know how long that first broken line of text actually is so we can appropriately measure where the next line break needs to be. If it sounds a little confusing, no problem. Just keep track, and now that it's in your mind, once we get there, it might help everything click into place a little bit. So we're done with this script set defaults for text for now. We're actually going to be able to put a ton of information into this for our visual effects and stuff, but baseline functionality wise, this is all we need. So we're going to need to initialize these in our create event. So we'll put it down here, and I'll make this section called effects. Now these aren't effects right now, but it will contain a lot of that information, so putting this script here is probably the best place we can put it. And we need one more very simple variable that we will call last free space. This will just let us keep track of the last space in our text, which basically means where the last word ends. And if we can keep track of that, then we can measure how long all the words were before it. And if our line of text is too long, we can reset it at that space and put in our manual break. So that way it doesn't do that thing where it types a little bit and then once it gets too long, it snaps back down to the bottom. Okay, and one really cool thing about this is we can actually put this script somewhere else because it works based on this page number variable, and we need to set these defaults for each individual page number. Instead of having to do a separate loop for all of them, we can do exactly what we did here inside of our script text. If we just put this function here, then now for every single page that we add with this function, it will set all of the correct defaults with this variable because script text is keeping track of it. Okay, and before we head off, let's go up into our text section. I'm going to put this under our text length array, and we need to set up a couple more two-dimensional arrays to hold some data for each one of our characters. So the first bit of data we're going to need to get is the actual character itself. So we'll just call that char. That will be a two-dimensional array. We'll set it to nothing for now, and I'll space these out so we can talk about them. So much like the last ones, this number on the right is going to be our page number. So let's say we have 3 pages. The first page has 20 characters, the second page has 30, and the third page has 10. Once we loop through everything, we are going to have a variable, char 0 through 19 on page 0, 0 through 29 on page 1, and 0 through 9 on page 2. So that's what this array is doing. So we need to know what that character is, and then we also need its x and y positions. So char x of 0, 0. Just default that to 0, and we'll also default a char y to 0. Again, same information, character number on the page and the page itself. So now that we've done all that setup, we can use these variables in here to help us figure out all of these, because these are what's actually going to show up. So I'm going to scrunch them back in, and let's go to the draw event. Okay, we want to figure all this out in our setup. We want to do all this before the text box even tries doing anything at all. So because we need to find the character information on every page, we can do this code in our page loop that we're already doing here to get the text length. And then inside this loop, we are going to do another loop to loop through all of the characters on the page. Okay, so I've set up my loop here. I'm going to be setting the individual characters and finding where the lines of text should break. Another simple for loop, C for character, starting at 0. Oops, this should be less than, not minus. Oops. So as long as C is less than the text length of our current page that we're looping through, which we just got up here, then we will keep adding to C until we've gone through each and every one. Now remember, we are looping through both. So this is text length of the page that we're going through. So that's P right there. And we're going to be using both of these to get that two-dimensional array. Because like I told you, the left ones here are for the characters, and the right ones here are for the page. So I mentioned in the very first section of this tutorial that string functions start with the value 1 and not 0, which is different than pretty much everything else in programming, at least as far as most of what you're going to do in GameMaker is concerned. So to make things easier on myself, I create a local variable here called underscore char pause, and that equals C plus 1. Because if you have a string that just says hello, the H in hello would be the 1 symbol, not 0. So this should help explain that. Let's go ahead and store all of our characters into our two-dimensional char array. So I commented that out there. And we can say char of C P equals string char at, and then what this function looks for is a reference string and then an index or position to check that string to figure out what character is there. So we're going to use our text array that holds the whole page of text, and that's going to have to be the text array of our current page that we're looping through. So text P, and then we're looping through with C and altering C with char pause, so underscore char pause. And this is what I mean. So this function, if our text on this page said hello and you type in string character at, it will not return H if you put 0 here. It will only return H if you put 1, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to harp on that anymore. It just makes things a little bit easier for me personally, having this other variable that compensates for it on its own. So now we have that, easy enough. Now to find where the line breaks go. So we can say get current width of the line that we're typing. So in my notes I have this all in one line, but it might be a little bit easier to separate it out into a couple different variables. So let's set a local variable and we'll call it text up to char. And there we can use the function string copy to copy from a string that we have. So we're going to use our text. We pick the first position it should start copying from, and then how many characters from there to keep copying. We're just going to copy from the beginning, so we need to copy from our text page. We're going to start at 1, like I said, and then our count is going to be our character position. So now we have a line up to the character that we're looping through, and now we can use that to calculate our line width. So we can say var underscore current text w for text width, and we will set this to that string width of this string that we just got. And the way I've set this up, I only want to get the width of all of the letters of everything before the character we're looping through. So that would just be minus string width of our current char variable. So char cp. And I did not write this correctly. This should not be string. This needs to be string width. Okay, so this will help us find our line breaks. And we need another piece to help do that as well. So we can say get the last free space. And that one's easy. We can just say if the character that we're looping through, so the character of CP, is equal to a space, then that is what our last free space is. So last free space equals our char position. And I have +1 here. And I remember the reason I did this was because if I just put char pause, when the line would break, it would essentially break right here instead of here. And if the line breaks here, then that means the next line is going to start with a space, so it's not going to be lined up. So that's what this +1 is for. So it breaks here. So that space is at the end of one of the lines, and you can't even see it. And now we need to actually track where those line breaks need to happen. We're going to use all those line break variables that we set up earlier. So we will say get the line breaks, and I'm actually just going to type all this out and then walk through it one line at a time. Okay, so here we are. Don't be worried. It's just that each one of these lines benefits from having the other ones up on screen, so I can kind of point to other stuff and tell you what's going on, because a couple of these things work a little bit from the bottom up. Now default, our line break offset is 0 for each page. So since it's 0 right now, all we're checking for is if this value, if the width of the line up to the character we're at is above our line width, then we need to add a break. So first what we're doing is we're recording that break in our line break position. And this is that two-dimensional array that keeps track of every line break per every page. So again, right now on this first go through, the first time we hit this limit, our line break num starts at 0. So our first line break position will then be set to our last free space. So if the line gets too long halfway through a word, instead of immediately breaking halfway through that word, it says, okay, it's now too long, so I need to say that our line break happens at whatever our last empty space was. So we're not cutting up the words. So we've recorded that now. So now we just need to add to our line break num, because now we have more on this page. And lastly, we're going to get this line break offset. And we're getting it with the exact same principle as we did up here to get the current width of the line up to our looping position. We're just doing that, but we're just going up to our last free space. So I have a local variable. Sorry if these are a little long for you. I generally don't abbreviate things too much, just so I don't confuse myself like an idiot. This, we're getting the string of all of our text up to the last free space, just like we did up here, because we're going to need to measure that width. And then we're still doing the same thing. I just extracted it out to one more step again, because up here we also wanted to subtract the width of the character that we were on. And we already had this variable set up here, so we didn't need to make another local variable, but down here I did. We're getting the string of our last free space. So we're going string character at of our text page, the last free space, and we're doing the same thing. So our line break offset on this current page is now the width of all of the text in this up to that line break, the last free space, and then we're just cutting off that last little bit of that last character. Kind of like I said, these just arose from whenever I was testing this. This just made it look right. I can't exactly remember what the issue was, if maybe strings were cutting off slightly earlier than I wanted them to, but this is just how it worked out for me, was measuring these lines basically up to the previous character. There's probably an optimization to be made here. Something like just measuring up to the last space -1 and not needing this at all. So it's just these two lines. I'm gonna be honest, I wrote this tutorial very late in the night, and I remember it required a lot of tinkering, which most visual things do in programming. So this probably works here. That would probably work up here too. But just to be safe, I haven't tested this out yet. So for now, let's just do it this way. And I advise you to do it this way as well. And then once we're done, it could be a fun little challenge for you to go back and probably optimize a bunch of little dumb things that I did. But anyways, so now we are recording this line break offset. And so that means we're getting our current text width of only the new line because we're subtracting all of the previously broken lines. Because if you didn't have this here, or a concept similar to it, if it was just this, then after a certain point, every single character would break a new line, because every character up to that point would be greater than the line width. So that's why you need to compensate for the lines that you've already broken. There are other ways you could do this too, with different types of variables, different types of maths, but this is just the way that I got there. So, in this section here, we've now stored the individual characters and what they are, and we found where the line breaks should be. Now we need to get each individual character's X and Y coordinates. So we need to loop through again because we need all of this information before we do another loop. Because we need to know, especially all of this information down here, before we start setting the coordinates. So let's open up one more loop through the characters, and I'll call this getting each character's coordinates. So here's the new loop, set up exactly the same way, down to making it easier for myself in setting a char pause. Okay, now we're about to see some familiar stuff just a little bit. So let's start with our baseline X and Y coordinates where the first piece of text should start. I'm gonna do local variable var text X. I'll go ahead and set that to 0 and var text Y. Okay, we know what these need to be because we actually have it down here. So we need this information again, and this information. Now we can't use these local variables because they haven't been set yet, but also we're not going to be grabbing from the page that we're actually on in the text box. We need to be grabbing from the one that we're looping through up there. So that little P variable. So let's grab this. We're going to set this up here, and this is going to be out of the loop, out of the page loop. So that's a P, and then we're just going to grab our text box Y variable, because all this stuff has been set above us, so we can still use it up here. And then like down here, we're adding in the borders to the X and Y. And so let's just do that up here as well. Because if you haven't guessed, we're gonna get rid of this in a bit, but for now it's a decent reference to have. So we're gonna need to know the width again. So we're gonna need all this information again, exactly how it is. So we can copy this and paste it. And now I wanna have one more local variable called text line, and we'll set that equal to 0. We're going to use this as like a multiplier for our Y value to figure out how many lines down it is, so all the lines aren't drawing right on top of each other. So let's get what this actually needs to be by checking through our line breaks, and we can do a small loop here, compensate for string breaks, set up another loop here, and you see what I've done. I've set a local variable LB for line break. And so this is looping through how many line breaks that we have on this page. This is the main reason we needed to do a separate loop down here, because we need to loop through all of the line breaks in each page, and we can't do that unless we had a finished loop. So we already got it. We have all that information now from here, and now we're actually using it. So once again, I'm just going to type out these couple lines so I can talk about them all at once. Okay, so first I have if our char pause is greater than or equal to one of the line break positions that we're looping through on our current page, being looped through, then we're going to do this stuff. So what we're getting here is the information that we're going to use for our X and Y coordinates. We're getting and updating our current text width so we can know the X position of our single character, and we're getting our text line so we can know the Y position. So we'll say there's one line break in our page, so line break 0. So this checks if whatever character we're looping through is greater than our line break 0. That means the line is broken, which means both our X and Y information are going to need to change. So the first thing we need to do is set the X back to loop around and start from the left again. And the way we do that is by copying a string from our original text. So we're doing string copy from our original text. We are copying from that line break position, which was a free space, copying from that position, and we want to copy up to our character position. Like I said, down here, this is the start position you want to copy from, and count is how many characters after that you want to keep copying. This is not position 1 and position 2, it's position 1 plus how many characters. So if we want to get to our character position, this count needs to be the difference from where we want to be from where we started. So that's why it's character position minus line break position. If our line break position was the 5th character in the sentence and the character we're looping through is the 10th, then if we want to copy the space between them, we start at 5 and then we count 5 more, so 10 minus 5, or whatever these values end up actually being. And so then we're grabbing the width of that new copied string because that's where we're going to want our X offset to be. We want our character to draw after whatever the last character was. And then we also want to record what our text line should be. And so that is going to be LB plus 1. See, I wrote here, it's plus 1 because LB starts at 0. So if the first line break has happened, which would be line break pause 0 page, then we're saying that one line has been broken. And so we are one line down. And this works with higher ones too. So if there's multiple breaks in this line, all that will happen on the first break. And then on the second break, so we'll say line break position 1 of this page, then we'll know we need to be 2 lines down, and all of this code works perfectly with any number of breaks as well. So we got all that, now we just need to set the X and Y positions. So let's say add to the X and Y coordinates based on the new info. So let's do our X first. We got char underscore X. This is going to be C and P. Again, we're still looping through both the characters and the pages. We want to set this equal to this X here, so our base position plus our current text width. So there we go, all for the reasons I just explained. We start from our starting position, and then this is all taken care of up here and right here if necessary, and then char y cp equals underscore text y plus our text line, and that is going to be times our line sep variable we set in the very, very beginning. So if this code down here worked for you and everything looked fine and everything fit properly, then we've basically just done all of this manually, except now the text looping should work a lot better and we have individual control over every single character. And now we just need to draw it. So we can actually just straight up bomb these 2 lines. And let's draw our text. So let's do yet another little for loop here. Here we go, C equals to 0, as long as C is less than our draw char, because remember, that's the thing that's actually typing us up. Then we will add and loop through. So now we can just draw each individual one right here. Let's go draw text. The X position we want is obviously our char X, and we're looping through our characters, and the page we want to draw on is now our page variable, the actual page that we are on. Do the same with the Y, char Y page, and the actual string we want to draw is just our char. And let's just hope this goes well. Uh-oh. Alright, let me check on this. So I'm going to double click this to check on it. It's a malformed if statement, a malformed statement on this one. I don't know why that's there. Well, I definitely don't need that semicolon. Yeah, definitely pay attention to your compile errors and read them when they happen. And if you ever have any crashes, pay attention to what that says. Okay, let's hope again. Yeah, so no more of that typing halfway and then snapping back down. Obviously, just don't overload your text boxes like I did. But yeah, for me, at least, that's working great. Now, I've said this a couple times already. If you're getting errors or something is wrong, it doesn't look right, it's not doing what it's supposed to. First of all, if it is an error and you're actually getting error messages, look at your output, look at the actual error message that pops up. It should tell you what lines are wrong. Most of the time, it's going to give you a lot of information. Like when I saw mine, I don't know why I put that semicolon there, but I did by accident. I probably just fat fingered it, and I knew that wasn't supposed to be there. Mistyping variable names, getting variable names confused, abusing copying and pasting too much. A lot of different things can lead to small little errors. So if you're having some issues, now would be a good time to take a break, chill out, maybe have some mac and cheese, maybe a little Fresca, maybe pull your hair out a little bit, and then kind of go back through the video, check all the work that we've done, maybe watch the video at a higher speed, cross-reference all your stuff pretty carefully. If you're not really used to checking for issues, then this is really good practice for you to just get good at identifying where you think issues could be, because that's pretty important, and you get better at it, I promise. So yeah. Anyways, that was the big hurdle here. Now we can much more easily do the fun stuff.